Intermediate or advanced, I am happy that you are able to join us. Even as we are coming in, I'll just give us a few minutes. And while we are having those few minutes, I'll just go ahead and do a little bit of housekeeping. While the presentation is going on, first and foremost, please have yourselves on mute so that your audio, your background soundtrack does not interfere with our main host as they are giving their presentation. If you have a question, please lift up your hand and we will get to you. And all question, please type a Q in the chat and then your question so that we can keep track, so that now when it's time for the question and answer section, it is easy for us to get to your question and make sure you are sorted. Yes, and this is going to be a highly interactive session. So I'm just going to call out people. I'm not going to ask people to volunteer. So that's how it is. And even as we are trickling in, yes, I'd like us just to quickly share where we are tuning in from and what is your expectation from today's session, even though I haven't introduced it yet, but it's just good to have your expectation. So I will start in alphabetical order from my list. So Amanda, please unmute yourself. Tell us where you're tuning in from and what is your expectation from today's session. What's that one thing you'd love to get clarity on today? Amanda?
Hi, everyone.
Hi, Amanda.
First of all, I'm so glad I made it for this workshop. I'm always missing the weekday ones. I really needed to be here because I'm struggling with content for social media and, just creating stuff that I feel is good enough to put out there that I can use to market myself. So I'm very excited to learn and see, what new things I can do online to put myself out there. Thanks.
Thank you, Amanda. With struggling with stuff that is good enough. Check. All right, next, Daniel Orenge, please unmute yourself. Where are you tuning in from and what's your expectation from today's session? And please kindly turn your camera on when you're speaking.
Hey, thanks, man. Cool. I'm logging in from another county, Rongai. I'm actually at home. I'm glad to be here.
Welcome.
I'm excited about the discussion today, especially somebody who has discovered sort of like his niche. I already have an idea of what sort of thing will give me content. And I've been working on that. Now, it'll be good to know how I could monetize on this going forward. Good thing is that it keeps me busy, keeps me active, it keeps me practicing. But now thinking about monetizing, it would be a fantastic thing to learn more about. Thanks for today's.
All right. Thank you very much, Daniel. How to make that money with your content. Adam Duzman, please unmute yourself. Turn on your video. Where are you tuning in from and what's your one expectation from today's session?
Hi, Andrew. Hi, everyone. I hope you can hear me.
Oh, loud and clear.
Awesome. So I'm tuning in from South Sea in Nairobi.
Welcome.
Yeah, thank you, Asante Sana. My camera is not on because I'm still cooking iftar. I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Yeah, so my one expectation from this session is that I'm just starting over in this voice. I've been really interested in voiceovers for quite a long time. I just didn't have direction on how to go about it. A friend of mine referred me to Valk, and so here I am. So I expect to hear more from other people, what they're doing, how they're doing it, how they set up, how to monetize. I guess it's quite a lot, but in a nutshell, that's what it is.
All right, thank you very much.
Yes.
Yes, I want to be able to get to each and every single one of you, but please, now I'd like you to go ahead and type in the chat where you're logging in from and your expectation, because now today's session is going to be highly interactive and we're here because we're talking about content creation and marketing ideas for getting voiceover work. And our guest today has over 20 years of experience in this. So he is the right person to unlock this for us. And he's a strategic and dynamic leader in strategy, leadership, business, media and communications, and content development. So during this time, make sure you ask your questions. If you don't ask it, please put it in the chat. We'll figure out how to get him afterwards for another session. He holds a degree in media from the University of Nairobi. He's a certified professional coach, and he sits on the boards of Buni Media and Waridi events. You're familiar with Buni Media having numerous productions, including the XYZ show, which is a political satire show inspired by Jim Henson's puppet style. So this accomplished creative is going to help us because he's been able to express himself, he'll help us express ourselves. So without further ado, welcome, AKA King Julian II, Julian Macharia.
Hi, everyone. I ignore the last part of King Julian. Just a mention, I was also happened to be in high school with Andrew. So I know him from way back before he had a base. So welcome, everyone. It's such a pleasure to meet all of you and engage. Hi, Jennifer. Hi, Jazz. People whom I've interacted with and met. So thanks for this chance. I think Jennifer is one who reached out to me the first time, and we had been talking, and then Andrew, and we said, "Yep, let's see what we can do together." What I want to talk about, it's an interesting subject matter. Content and so on, and the expectations around monetizing, how to break into the space. So it's a very broad conversation. So of course today, just to manage expectations, I'll only touch on some principles. Of course, I'll share the presentation for you to spend more time in it. So I just want to spend a few minutes, maybe my estimate is about 30 minutes, just taking you through some thoughts I have, some I've compiled and learned from others. Then we'll open it up for Q&A, because I think the more we engage, as the more you draw me out is when I'll think. And like I always say, all these things I'm sharing is purely based on my observation, my experience. There's no hard formula. I've also invited two of my friends to join the call today. I know one has joined. I think someone else is joining. And one of them, his name is Eric Musioka. He runs a company called Decibel Media, and probably the premier production facility in East Africa. And then there's someone else called Simaloida Jom. I know she was in a meeting. I hope she'll join, but she's a consultant and also works with Internews. But before that, she's had lots of years in broadcast. And the reason I asked them to come is, I was working with voiceovers quite a while ago in another regime, and not Jubilee. So before that, but I used to do a lot of video work. I also ran my own studio. You had some of the work we did with the XYZ show. So maybe just briefly about some of the work I've done. So I started my career initially as a music producer. So I did that for about 6 years. I ran my own studio, and sort of label. Then I went into broadcast media. I was there for another probably 10 years, and working specifically in radio. So, I worked with presenters and a lot of talent, and did a lot of design and setup for radios in the East Africa region. Then I went into behavior change communications. Then from behavior change, I've now transitioned into doing strategic communications. So what I'm doing is just sharing, just over the years, some tips. So I'm going to focus mainly on content. Then I'll touch briefly on voiceover work. And the reason I thought that is the way I see the voice, and of course, you're free to rebuttal. I've always seen the voice as a tool in the arsenal as all other tools are. So some people use animation, some people use acting, people like Jazz, who are performers, Andrew is a storyteller, so on and so forth. So people have different ways. VoiceOver is just one of the avenues to create content, but content is the higher thing. So you have content as an umbrella, then you have different formats. So for me, voice is just a format. So I felt I can't spend the entire time talking about voice because it's just one of the ways. So I'm going to just talk about that briefly, but what I want to spend time more is on content, because content is universal and it is subject to what you want to create, even if it is not visual content. Maybe you're a writer, maybe you're you want to do publishing, you want to create music, you want to do gaming, to be all that is content. So I think we just want to explore that. Of course, the principles are sharing are more best practice. Now, qua ground in Kenya, things may change. The reality may change. So we will look at that, and that will make more sense maybe as we do the Q&A. So allow me to just dive into the slides. Let me know if you see my screen. The page is changing. There, great. Thanks, Andrew. So I'm going to look at the pillars of content, and I'm going to shift it a bit. Many times content people dive into the tactic or the creative process, and I want to shift that for you slightly today. These are the pillars of content in my experience. First, you identify your objectives and goals. What do you want to achieve with your content? But many of us start with the butterfly feelings, the waking up in the middle of the night with an exciting idea. That's fine, capture that. But that is more in terms of formatting. That is more in terms of the approach. But when you're looking at it from, and I want you to look at everything I'm talking today, we are talking about content that is viable, either that helps you achieve your goals, whether it's some impact or change you seek, or revenue. So not art for art's sake, which is okay, and there's a place for that. But today our mission is the content is serving us in one way or another. So the first thing is setting your goals, being clear on who your audience is, what are your outcomes, or what is success. So in a sense of how will you know this thing is working, and there's some level of measurement you're going to talk about there. The environment you're operating in, this could be on the subject matter or your physical environment, where you live, the country you operate, but it could also be environment from a sector point of view. What resources you have. So I may want to do an avatar, but can I do it in Kenya? Is it practical? I think the last one cost $50 million. If I had $50 million, I retire. Yeah. So by the time you come up with that idea, can you actually back it up? Then at the end is when I talk about channels. And for me, at channels level is when it matters. Are you going to do video? Are you going to do animation? Now this is when you get to the tactics. So the first thing is defining your objective. And here what you're just saying simply, I'm creating this content for this. Now, it doesn't mean your objective has to be deep or altruistic. Your objective could be, I just want to make people laugh. I just want to make a really, really nice comedy. Or I want to create a high quality production to demonstrate that we have the capacity to make a good content in this country, for example. That's a clear objective. But more so, what is the objective of your content? Because content is a story, content is information, content is expressing something. So the question here is, why do you want to express it? Why does this need to be told? Why does this story have to be told? So what's that higher level thing? And sometimes your story could even be based on a true story. So I love watching detective dramas, and the more it's based on a true story, the more exciting, because it makes me realize, oh my God, this actually happened. Like someone did this crime, tried to cover up. It's so vivid, because to me, I'm curious about the lengths humans will go to do stuff. So if I watch a nice drama, it may not have anything, but maybe the producer wanted to tell a story, or they just wanted to, it's just a story that was so wild and crazy that they just felt the world needs to know this story. So there may not necessarily be something tangible, but you need a plan for that. And your objective, of course, we know the acronym. It should be as much as possible specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-bound. And basically what this means, I should be able to ask you, and in a simple paragraph, you describe what it is you're working on and what's your end game with it. It could even be as simple, like a friend of mine, Fakili Wali, made this movie 40 Sticks, which is on Netflix. He's not a filmmaker, but he said he just felt he's never seen a nice Kenyan horror. That's it. He loves horror movies and said, I want to make a Kenyan horror. He really didn't have any deep end game, but that was his thing. He always wanted to do a film, and he said, in fact, I'm going to do a horror. And that was the thing. And he made a plan for it. He built resources around it. And that's it's not that doing the horror will change the world, but I'm sure it has inspired filmmakers somewhere, has inspired actors somewhere. So maybe that was his intent. So basically, what's the motivation behind your idea? What change do you want to see? And change doesn't have to be major. What's your vision for the project? I've seen directors who do projects because they just want to push the envelope in terms of content, entertainment, visual. Sometimes it's not even entertainment. I think we've all been watching recently the Gold Mafia series by Al Jazeera. I mean, it's quite clear the intent there. So it's sitting down and saying, look, there's a scandal happening. We want to create something that is still content. So content doesn't have to always be entertainment. It could be education, information, whatever it is. Yeah. You could also just be doing it for profit. So you make a really nice series. I mean, why is Avengers being made? There's no goal to change that. In there are some themes, but I think ultimately it's a business product. So it's just basically thinking through what are those things you want people to do. Sometimes you create content to provoke an action. Maybe you've seen a social issue in society. Maybe you just want people to love one another, or maybe you want to explore a complex conversation around sexuality. So that's why you're creating the content, or you want people to rethink a certain area no one is talking about. After you create the content, so this idea, your idea may come up in the middle of the night, but in the light of day now, you need to interrogate it and ask yourself, okay, is this just an exciting, fuzzy feeling for me? Is it just me who cares about this content piece? Because sometimes it's a great idea, but only great in your mind. Yeah. Once you put it out there, it tanks, and which is okay. But then sometimes because you didn't interrogate it. So once you identify that content, you begin to ask other questions. Who is this audience you're developing this content for? And I want you to think of content like any other product. So when Unilever decides to make a new lotion or a new soap, just give me 1 second.
Wow, I'm loving it. That even when your idea comes at night, when the morning comes, you have to interrogate it. I think, so far that's just level 1 of the experience. The idea has to come. And then now it's your job. How do you take the next step?
Yeah. And I think now what separates, so I was giving the example of Unilever. So you have a lotion, you have a soap. So soap is soap. It has its functional aspect of cleaning. Yeah, at least it must be able to clean. Then you start deciding, will this be a brand for ladies? Will it be a brand for upper class? Will it be a brand for athletes like Lifebuoy? Always positioned itself for rugby players because it had a very strong sense. So its idea was, if you sweat heavy, you do manual work, this is a soap for you. It lasts. Geisha positions itself as value. It's huge, not practical to handle, but it's economical. You buy and it lasts for long. But at the core, it's all soap. So how to look at it, all content is content. It is consumed by someone. Now, how you start differentiating is based on your audience. So when I create this content, so if you said, I have this idea for a children's show, for Pete's sake, you're not going to have gory images and blood and nudity, right? It's all content, but because you're targeting kids, suddenly you start developing new boundaries. So it's very important, and that's why I said when you're clear on your objective. For example, if you said, I want to create something funny, I want something when people watch, they feel good about themselves. So you can create Friends or you can create Ben 10. Both make people feel good, but at different ages, different context. You can make Tinga Tinga Tales targeted at Africa, both make people feel good. So in terms of objectives are similar, then audiences is where you start to split. And those are some of the questions you're going to start asking. Who are they? And I think many of you here, you're all experts in your own fields. And when you're creating something, any communication or message, you think about who is receiving it. And it impacts timing, it impacts formatting. If it's something visual, the characters you're going to display. If you're talking to people in the village, it informs their language, their references. So you can't make a reference about, the other day when I was in New York, and you're talking to people in the middle of Moranga, because what does that mean? What's New York? They have no reference. So these are the things, that's the implication of all this. And remember, you're kind of holding your idea here and you're subjecting it to kind of all these questions, because later on, it has an impact. You're going to see how that does that. So when you're thinking of audiences, there are many variables to explore. There's geographical factors, demographic, I've already touched on age, gender. There is certain content appeals to Africans, other appeals to Latin Americans. If you're looking for donors, there's a way you package your content, knowing this is going to US or Europe. Then other social graphic things, what are their values, what are their beliefs? We've seen a lot of nice dramas, things like Sugar, challenging HIV stereotypes. So there's something they're intending. So you'll see Lupita there, it's a nice love story, but in between the lyrics, in between the dialogue, you can tell, there's something here. There's some questions they're bringing about here. then behavior segment. And you've seen all these shows, like when you watch things like even if I may use Avatar, because it's the last big budget thing I saw, Avatar has a very big theme around climate change, yeah, and protecting the planet. And you see what they've done is taken the core idea and then escalated it and put it on steroids. And, you know, so it's a great show to watch purely. But when you're done, you want to hug a tree. You see, oh my God, we are ruining our planet. So that maybe is the intent. I don't know, but I suspect, because when you watch the series, you realize, okay, that's the thread. Others, like Avengers, it's about how power corrupts and how greed is bad. Sometimes you pick one single idea, simple as African folklore. You're told why the tortoise does that. The story was never about the tortoise, yeah? If you really dig deeper, there's always that deeper meaning. So that's how to think around content and audiences. Then decide what is success for your content. Yeah, how will you know it's doing well? So it doesn't have to be always mass market. Some content is done, and it doesn't mean you break the box office or you get thousands and hundred thousands of views. Not necessarily, depending on who your target audience is. Someone here may want to do content that is targeting a specific decision maker or policy or a certain community, or maybe business leaders in one way or another. So business leaders, captains of industry are like, what, 100 people? So you want them to know about maybe you're creating content. And this doesn't mean the content is created by you. It could also be commissioned. Maybe you produce adverts or commercials. So you want to push a certain high-end hotel or holiday package and everything. So how do you know? So if you push a high-end holiday package, you're not expecting 10,000 likes. No, it's very few people maybe who can afford that. So it's about getting 50 of the right people, yeah? So that's how to look at the success of content. Some content benefits by mass. Some content matters, is it the right people? Because you can have 10,000 views, but of the wrong target audience. Yeah, so 10,000 people viewing on YouTube, but they're from Nepal. For some reason, they like your show, yet you're trying to make money in the Kenyan context. So just to give an example. So success means different things. And you see, if you're clear on what success is, then you would be under pressure from other people's success. Andrew or Jazz has agreed. Jazz has content on Netflix that works for her. But if I may use even Buni Media, the XYZ show for us, we were lucky we got great audience views online, but that was never our target. Our target was to speak power, the politicians, challenge them, let them know we are seeing what you're doing, we are seeing how you're trying to hoodwink us. That really was a target. So for us on the XYZ show, the day we were mentioned in Parliament by an MP, complaining that XYZ has gone too far, for us, that was success. Yeah, in spite of the views, because the views are good, we welcome them. And we also worked even on the XYZ show, actually, with Jazz. The true achievement was the day we were mentioned, the day Minister came to the studio, the day Martha Karua came to take a photo, Alfred Mutua, Kalonzo Musyoka. Now that was success, because it was telling us the true people who satire is targeted for is those leaders. Yeah, so the public, it's great, but all we were doing was amplifying what the public sentiment was saying. So success is relative. Yeah, so it's very important to hold that, so you don't beat yourself and think your show is not working, but it's because you're trying to be Eric Omondi, but Eric Omondi is doing slapstick comedy, he's doing stunts. That's his core content, right? But you want to do something deeper, something different. You need to be very aware. So similarly, if I use a soap analogy, if you've used your target was women and women are not buying, then you failed. But your soap may be selling, yeah. But if your intent was to break into the female market because you feel that's a big opportunity, then you need to relook at your product and ask, how come I'm getting more men, not women? Yet that's my intent. Sometimes you get a blessing in disguise. You created a format to target a certain demographic audience, then you attract a different one, which is good. But it's important to know what you are chasing. The other thing I'll talk about is appreciate your environment. So this is just a standard model. It's used even in business and everything. You just think of, the bargaining power of suppliers. So basically, suppliers here in our case would be, you're a producer. How much is your talent going to cost? You need to hire technical people, lighting folks. If you're doing audio voiceover, if you need to hire a studio, what's the reality of that? If you're going to create content, what are the options? What are the threat of new entrants? You start a nice show. How easily is it replicable? So you have a great idea. And I always say most ideas are not that unique. The difference is implementation in the finishing. Yeah, because if I have an idea here and another top studio in the US has a similar idea. Because they have the market, they have the resources, the technical capability, they'll take my simple idea, but take it to the next level. And I'll be saying, oh my God, I had that idea, but theirs is now an HBO. So you see, I can't compete, right? Stuff like that. So it's to look at what are those things. And also for us as Africans, we also need to think what ideas we can develop that are so unique to our environment that it's almost hard to replicate. I'll give you an example of Vioja Mahakamani or Inspector Mwala or Papa Shirandula. These are formats that are so unique to Kenya or so unique to Africa, it may not even work in the US. I can't imagine in the US a police station centered around one inspector. You know, that's CSI for them. Here we don't have CSI. The reality is people go to the police station and say, this person stole my cow. And that's where the story starts. And it gets more complex. So we don't have serial killers, incidences. We don't have complex crimes here. Our stories are simple. So you may find a series like Inspector Mwala. Maybe you don't watch it, but if you go to the villages and go to those police stations, go to the chiefs, that's how it is. That's why no wonder as a show, it's endeared itself to people. The threat of substitute products. Here, when you're thinking of content, remember the example I'm using of, have I created content to make people feel good? So people will feel good irrespective. So they will either watch Andrew's talk show, Jazz's satirical show, but the point is that emotion will be met. So when you're developing your content, you need to kind of ask yourself, this emotion, this knowledge I'm offering, this experience I'm giving using my content, is there anyone doing something like this? Because I'm surprised a number of times I meet people with an idea and they tell me and they say, haven't I watched something like that on NTV? I mean, everything you've described. And I tell them, have you checked this out? They say, no. I'm saying, oh my God, please go watch. Then you realize it's the same concept. Maybe yours has a tweak here and there, but the truth is if you offer it to the audience, they'll all say, yeah, that just reminds me of that show. So this is something very important. And there's a role here about research. And then the bargaining power of customers. And these are your audiences. What do they want? Are they ready to pay for it? And how do they pay? Maybe they pay through views. Maybe your customer is someone in the business community. Are they ready to advertise or sponsor your content? So I'll move a bit faster now. So then evaluate your resources. This is quite straightforward. What can you do with what you have? So I've seen people with ideas bigger than they can support. So it's always can I do a minimum viable product? Can I do a limited edition version, a demo to capture the concept? Like for me right now, I'm working on a TV format. I have it very clear in my head. And because of my orientation, I'm not even bothered going into doing a pilot. I'm going to look for funding first. Because I know once I have someone committed, then it is worth my time to do the pilot, because I know I've done pilots before and they're sitting on my hard disk, not doing much. So now I've changed my approach. Now I'm selling the idea. If I can get people committed to the idea, then it is worth me putting my time and energy developing a format. Some of you have access to resources, and resources does not necessarily mean cash. It could be facilities. You have a friend who has a studio, a pal who has equipment and facilities. So you can ask them, hey, could we collab on this? Can we work together on this? So it's looking at all these resources. So like I said, it could include network resources, brand resources. Jazz, because of the work she's done in the past on TV, on radio, she has a brand resource. So I can ask Jazz, please take me to meet Coke. Coke will see you. If you call them, they'll take your call. Me, Julian, who are you? So brand is a resource, yeah? You've built your name in different sectors, different industries. How can you tap into this? Then operational resources. You could have the individual skill itself. Some of you here are animators. Some of you are brilliant writers. So that's already a resource. So it could be telling someone, hey, look, Tosh Gitonga, I can't afford, I need to do a demo. Can I write for you something for your next project? You pay me back with a shoot or something, the butters, whatever I need to do. And this is how many people have survived and continue to grow. Then I want to touch on content distribution. So content distribution, there are three broad ways. There's earned media. So earned media would be things like where people are talking about your content. People are saying, wow, have you watched this new show? It's amazing. That's because of how impactful it is. Then paid media is where you pay. So you pay someone to push your content, whether it's a website, an influencer, a TV show, whatever that may be. Then owned media, your own platform. So this could be your own channels. This could be maybe you have a website for your production house or your collective, whatever that may be. So the point is that all these channels you can access. And of course, there's detailing there. And the idea usually is you always want to try and build stuff on owned media first, which eventually goes to earn before you have to actually spend money. But there is a threshold where for you to go to the next level, you'll have to back it up. But what you hopefully want to do is your content is so engaging that people just share it. People just distribute it because it's powerful and it's ticking so many boxes. We all see how when Game of Thrones is on air, I mean, the whole world becomes an influencer. I remember to see, so I'm not a fan of Game of Thrones, but I always knew what was happening. I knew who had been killed, and I could tell just by going on Monday nights. You see, that one, they're not having to pay for that. You see, so that's the power of a good content or good storytelling.
Oh, enough. Let's use your phone when you're driving.
Then after that, you talk about channel selection. So channel selection is you've created so remember at this point, you've not gone into production. This all is thinking. This you're just thinking of how you're going to do it. Then channel selection, you decide now what format, what do I want to do? Do I want to do a podcast? Do I want to do a radio show? Do I want to do animation? Do I want to do TV? And because you have an objective, you assessed your resources, you've thought about your audience. You see now it kind of starts directing you what direction and what channels you're going to use. So by audience dependent, when you're selecting your channel, what channel do your audience prefer to consume? So that's a part of our lady. She prefers listening to FM for whatever reason. Could be access to power, internet, her lifestyle. So you can create an amazing content format that speaks to women in rural areas, empowering them. Then you put it on YouTube. Then you have 5 views, and the 5 views are all from urban areas. So you see, you've missed the point. But if your plan was to talk to women in rural areas about empowering them, expanding their thinking on entrepreneurship, so on and so forth, you need to go back and ask what format do they listen to, which station do they like, what language do they like. Then your format is dictated by that. Then resources, we also spoke about what's practical. Which channel is realistic? TV just costs a lot of money, but radio is much less. Your content could be as simple as text. You have something, you do a thread online, you do a series of blogs, that's still a format. And then what are your objectives? So do you want to move people emotionally? Yeah? We know visual content is more emotive. Maybe you're an artist. So an artist is great. So you've created a series of artworks, but if you do in a gallery, you've tied yourself to a physical location. So you might say, no, I'm going to do this series, then I'm going to paint it. Like there's a guy I've seen recently doing some content around the protests. There's a painter I've been seeing, and what he's doing, he's capturing paintings of different scenes of the protests, and he's sharing them on Twitter, and the numbers, the likes are insane, and I'm sure he's selling product. But imagine if he did an exhibition at National Museum, 100 people would show up, but suddenly on Twitter, it's blown up and it's working for him. And when you're thinking channel selection, don't dismiss traditional media. It depends really on your objective, your audience, what you're trying to achieve, resources. So that's why I said channel selection comes much, much later. You have digital, of course, they're all and sundry. But for me, the secret is you need a mix. I don't think you can do one. So even if you start with on one side, digital, because that's a resource of what you can have access to, it's fine, but do not discount the power also of traditional media. And the reason is there's some content, of course, it's changing with time, but there's some content that just works better on digital, others works better on traditional. And don't forget, face-to-face is also a channel. So for those of you who do theater, who do traveling, who do events, even an event format is still part of content. Then, of course, track and measure. So you can imagine you have all this running in the background, then you define what success is, then now you go into production and you put out your content. And because you're so clear on who you're targeting, so clear on your objectives, you will know what to measure and measure what matters. Yeah. So it could be views, it could be number of comments, just saying dope show, we love it, you guys are nuts, whatever. Then sentiments, how I never looked at it that way. I really like this thing, it's made me think this way. How come so and so hates so and so? I realize even in life, maybe for you, you just wanted to get a conversation. Maybe you have a specific call to action. You want people to demand something. We know content in the past has led to revolutions, the right content. Even news, actually, as a format, is content. Like what John Alanamu does, he does investigative pieces. It's still content. It's only that his is non-fiction and it's more procedural. And then what are your desired outcomes? So if you wanted something, maybe a law to change, you wanted a certain culture to change, maybe like, I don't know, something like FGM, you collaborate with people working in that space. So you say, I'm going to create this content the challenges, myths and issues about FGM. And then on this other side, we are going to track that. So that's some of the ways you can do that. I want to pause there for like 5 minutes, and then Jazz, I think you'll need to add me like another 10. Then we talk about monetization. So we are kind of midway, and just hear if there are any reactions to that. Nothing too big, and then we can proceed.
Yes, put up your hand so you may be able to speak and be heard. 3 people, come on. Time is ticking, time is ticking. No one wants to comment? Feel free to say it sucks. We want more. This is not what I signed up for. Anyone? All right, well, you know what? Okay, I'll just go ahead and go random. I'm gonna go Wanjiku Mwirigi. Please unmute yourself. Let us know. One comment from what you've heard so far.
Hi, Andrew and everyone.
How are you?
I'm well. Joined in a bit late, but he makes it sound extremely easy. Extremely easy. Until you get to the work and you're like, no views, no comment. And you're like, okay, now what do I do? Do I stop? Do I quit? And yet, I'm good at now, like for me personally, I'm good when it comes to psychology. But then no one is consuming what I have. The reality of things. So I'm not good enough at this. Or yes, I have this idea. I go to this producer, but I do not have the funds for it. I am new in the market. So even if I tell you, look, go to my YouTube channel and check, nobody has viewed. So what can I do for them to buy into that? I have this. I do not have the money. I need the funding. So what happens to Wanjiku and many other people who are wondering like myself?
Wow, great question. I guess, Julian, maybe you can get that during the question and answer session, or do you want to comment something now?
Yeah, I think I can take one more, and then yeah.
All right. I haven't heard from Kavana in a long time. Please unmute yourself. Let us hear a lovely voice. What is one thing you've gotten so far?
Hi, Andrew. Hi, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
Oh, okay, fantastic. So just kind of piggybacking off of what Wanjiku said, one of the things that Julian had mentioned was he wants to source the finances first. Now, in this Kenya that we live in, how easy is it for you to pitch an idea? How do you protect your intellectual property while sourcing for that financial side of it? Because a lot of the times you pitch an idea, guys will be like, it's great. Next thing you know, it's already there on SAFCOM or NTV or whatever. So how do you do both? Protect and source.
Wow. Powerful question, Kavana. Thank you. Guys, if you have your questions, remember in the format I've asked, please put a Q, semicolon, and then your question, because I know a lot of thoughts are coming up as Julian is sharing, and not everyone will get a chance to verbalize their question. But even though you don't get an opportunity to verbalize, we do not want to deny you the opportunity of your question being heard and addressed. So yes, go ahead, Julian. Would you like to respond to that now or later on as you continue your presentation?
Yeah, I think, and I don't have all the answers. So I think you've had the questions. Anyone who has some thoughts on those two questions? I think the one on protection, I think it's that one is quite kind of a direct answer. But I think the first one on how you've created content, you're doing all this, and still you don't seem to be getting traction. Anyone with experience with that, and how did you go about it? Then I'll respond on the IP one.
Yes, Julian, I can respond to that since my podcast, which is called The Revenge of the Forsaken Gods, where I interview psychologists and coaches about life things that our parents, teachers, and society don't teach us about. Even though I was fired up and I shared this on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, people were not, I wasn't getting the numbers and views, and I was mad and angry. And I remember someone asked me, you know, how are you going to monetize this? And because I didn't have the answer, I took a break. But what I've been doing is I normally share this to everyone in my WhatsApp list. And what I've noticed is people are listening. And they might not tell you and respond in the comments or what have you, but when you meet people offline, they'll tell you, oh my God, I heard this. I love this guest. I have this. And then the beauty is the platform also gives you numbers. My podcast, I was actually targeting men, but my language was not gender specific because I know that women also have men in their lives. And what the data showed me, it's like over 70% women were listening compared to men, 30%. So I was surprised. So all I'll say is you cannot get data until you put yourself out there. Use your WhatsApp list, send it to all your contacts, text message, what have you. Make sure that any person that you interact with, have them listen to it, because someone listening to what you have, someone listening to your content is a privilege. It is not a right. That is the main thing I've learned. So sometimes is your content not engaging? Some content is easier to consume than others, like comedy is easy to consume, but psychological information tends to be very heavy. And that is what podcasting has humbled me, learning how to package it in storytelling, because storytelling is how human beings communicate. Yes, you have something important, but the audience doesn't care if you start throwing names, big names. I'm Dr. So-and-so, yes, trauma, blah, 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 blah. Is who are you producing for? Produce it for the audience. You're speaking to your fellow learned men and women who are up there. If you want the audience and you know they're down here, I was told, if you cannot, if a 5-year-old cannot explain your content, then you have to repurpose your content. Produce it where a 5-year-old can understand. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Andrew. Any other thoughts, maybe before I give my reflections?
Just to add,
sure.
No, just a quick one, because it was like a small question which I sort of answered myself. And I've started creating content around, like I've mentioned to many of my colleagues, around my recovery journey as an alcoholic. And all started with a wow. There was a wow effect when I was releasing. Then it all dipped. So I started wondering, am I doing the right thing? So I think what I got from Julian is perhaps maybe I wasn't reaching the right market, you know, and that hasn't stopped me from producing what I'm releasing. But I think more importantly from this workshop is to tweak it, make sure I'm targeting the right audience. And as also Andrew has said, when you meet people on the streets, yeah, they are listening. People are listening, but they're not going to give you those likes maybe yet. Hopefully in the near future.
Yeah, thanks for that. And thanks for sharing. Jennifer, I think you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I wanted to say this as one who's been putting out content, not for too long, but the reaction from people has been very helpful in that they tell me that it takes time, that there's people who have are gleaning the fruit of having been on social media 2-3 years after, and seeing that people were actually consuming it, and now they're ready for it. Kind of what they say is like the marketing have in your mind that you put yourself, but for when they want it, they'll know to come, and because you've been consistent, you've been putting your stuff out regularly, and so when the need arises, then they've had enough interaction with you quietly to know they can come to you. So that kind of gives an understanding of the patience required. But what I'm hearing you say, Julian, and you can maybe speak into that,
is that there is a more targeted way, because what I'm hearing is kind of like Wanjiko, kuna kazi, you need to be more targeted. You need to really think about where the people you want to target are. So are you going to Instagram, or are you going to LinkedIn, or are you going to Twitter? And then what do you do with those statistics? You have to spend some time with the statistics if you're really serious about the first, that whole list of what you've given us. What is your objective? If you're just doing it to feel your way out, and which may be like, for me, it's like, let me just see what this looks like, then that information starts trickling in pole pole, and I then begin to manage it. But there is a more structured way, is what you're telling us today, to do it. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for that. So that's what the two questions asked sessions in of themselves, by the way. So I'm just going to give the high level what it is. I think the question is around the struggle and everything we are doing. The first thing I want to say is don't take it personally. Number one, there's like, I think the statistics are insane. I think YouTube, there are like 3 billion uploads of 3 billion minutes of content daily. It's insane. I mean, we are living in a very unique time of unlimited content and limited options. So that's the first thing. So sometimes for one reason or another, your content may not have connected, but it's not, I always say, I never blame the audience, yeah? Unless it's not an audience I intended for, or an objective I had in the first place. So I think the first thing is to be aware of that. Then the other thing is don't be too attached to a format. Now, what I mean is sometimes you find, like now, let me give a statistic. Globally, there is, the podcast market is 3% of the public. That's a global statistic. Only 3% of humans listen to podcasts. So I want you to just think about that. And that's a US framework. Now imagine in Kenya. That's US, where they have almost unlimited Wi-Fi, unlimited access to devices. So when you start cascading that, you realize maybe the podcast market in Kenya is maybe 10,000 people maximum. You see, so even if you were to get 1,000 people, you have actually 10% market share. That's like huge. But because in your mind, you're imagining my podcast should be like Joe Rogan in America with 10 million views, but you need to ask, it's 10 million worldwide. So these are some of the realities we need to appreciate, where sometimes we have, and that's why I said it's about setting objective and defining what success is. If you've not taken time to research, understand the space, you'll be imagining others are doing better than you. You'll be imagining I'm not even doing good enough, but because you have no benchmark, you have no framework of what is a successful place. I like to use this analogy a lot when I train people, and I always say, maybe on average, each Kenchik makes 500,000 bob a month. Kenchik, the fish and chips and sausage place, maybe the average Kenchik makes 500,000. So if you opened one and your intent was to make 5 million, even if you make 1 million, you always beat yourself and say we are failing. But did you actually spend time to inquire how much on average does a regular Kenchik make? If you're told they make 500,000, it's going to inform you how much you invest. It's going to inform how much time you put, how much energy. Why? Because you're aware this is the upper limit. So it is romantic to imagine that this content will blow up and will go beyond my wildest dreams. It never happens. Even Walt Disney, from as early as 1958, had already drawn the entire structure and strategy for Disney, which is actually coming to fruition around the year 2000. So imagine 50 years downstream is when Walt Disney's big idea of the Disney franchise. For all those 50 years, they've just been doing random stuff. So it's complicated stuff. And I'd like to encourage you to realize content is like any product. And that's why I kept using the example of soap. Even if you today decided I wanted to make soap, even if you manufacture and you go put it outside, there's no way it's going to sell that day. There's a whole universe. Yeah, you need to get KEBS approval. You need to do adverts. You need to get into supermarkets. So I want you to use that same framework and say, just uploading it on YouTube, the content will not travel organically unless it's shock and graphic content. You captured footage of an earthquake, rare things, which, even then, you still need to do some work to get it out there. So those are two things I'd like to say. The last thing I'd like to say is that when I talked about exploring formats, you may find you've created something that you create as a podcast, but you realize, no, it's not working. So sometimes the problem is not the content, it's your implementation. So your example of giving your recovery journey, I don't know how when you say you're creating content, I don't know if you're writing a story, is it a blog, do you do interviews? Are you going to do it in a dramatical series? Because I've watched TV series around where someone is struggling with alcoholism and the impact it has on their family and their community. See, so you're still telling your story, but you've chosen a new format. Then when you're creating content, you don't have to be the starring person. Because I find a tendency when people say I'm creating content, I must be there. All my life, I have never been in any of the content I create. What I am is, I create content, I script, I ideate, but I know I can't act, sing, video, nothing. So what I do, I create a concept and I say, you know what, Jazz, you're going to do this for me. You're the one who can bring it to life, but I'll produce, I'll fundraise for it. So just because maybe your passion is cooking doesn't mean you're going to be a good chef on TV. It'll be, I just want to make a really great cooking show, but I don't think I'm the right person. So let me get a celebrity chef. So you still get the content out there, but it doesn't mean you're the one behind the lens. So you need to also think about what role you're going to play in the content piece. Ideating does not mean you do end-to-end. So if you're good at content creation like Julian, I'm horrible in social media strategy. So when I create content, I get someone and say, now, can you market it for me? I really don't know how to market, but I'll tell them this show is targeting these people and I'm trying to achieve this. Then I hand it over. So please avoid imagining you can do everything end to end. And that's something I see with a lot of creatives. You want to script, you want to voice it, you want to edit it, you want to own the page, you want to distribute it. You all see the credits at the end of a good film. There are like 600 people on that project. So it's also understanding, yes, I may be a content ideator. Some people here are brilliant producers. You can't ideate, but when you see an idea, you really know how to chop it up and so on and so forth. I can see someone there commenting that requires money. Yes, but not always hard cash. There's a lot of content I've created that started with an idea and eventually it paid us. In fact, speaking of the XYZ show, the first time Gado told me about the show, I think he told me he got the idea in the year 2000. He fundraised for 8 years to do the pilot. I met him in 2008. We did the pilot. We did season 1 in 2013 after 5 years. So just to give you context. Now people will see Buni Media has its own studios. Buni Media has done the XYZ show in Tanzania, in Nigeria, all over the world. And you'll be like, wow, that idea, see how it started. But no one wants to talk about the 13 odd years we were twiddling our thumbs, waiting for someone to trust us to do the project. So sometimes, and I've seen Simaloy has joined and Eric is there. Eric comes more from the music and entertainment side. He'll be able to speak more and tell you about the journey. But all I'm saying is that the passion is good, but the market forces apply to content as it does to any other sector in the world, yeah? Jazz, I see you switched on your camera. Am I running out of time?
Oh no, we've got good time. We've got an hour to go. And I just wanted to add something also to what you were saying in regards to that requires money. It's true. However, if you want to get into the trick with content creation is also being able to collaborate and being able to think outside the box, like be able to create without needing money to do it. So that's the fun side of creativity, because if you don't have the cash and you still need to create, you got to solve that problem somehow, which might need you to network more, get yourself out there, see who is interested in and doing the same thing and is has the same frustration as you, so you two come together and do something. So it's I think money is an issue, but in terms of coming up with ideas that can attract money, that is also a possibility in content creation. So yeah, thanks, Julian.
Jazz, I think you opened the door for shows like the XYZ show. When you did your satire series, did you have cash? I mean, how did you get that on air?
We were very young. We were like 20-year-olds that had this great idea that we wanted to put on. And so we we would spend whatever time we had just writing scripts, meeting with friends and borrowing offices from parents and friends and other people who had jobs. And we just sat down and wrote it together. But obviously when you're younger, you have a lot more time on your hands because everybody's hustling. So it gets a bit more difficult when you have responsibilities, children and things like that. If you're younger, I mean, find a friend, sit down, write your idea and pitch, knock on doors until somebody says, yeah. And back then the internet wasn't this savvy. We had to go to offices. We had to call people from the yellow pages. Like there wasn't Twitter, you couldn't just rock up and be like, hey, yo, Obama, what's up is how, let me do a VO today, with you. We had to write and put stamps. So it was a bit more, like we used to really trek, but now the avenues to collaborate with people are endless. And the best thing about, I guess, the internet is that traditional media and traditional ways of creating content has now blown up. It's no longer just creating for TV, creating for radio, creating for a newspaper, a book, a novel. Now you can almost do anything your mind comes up with, especially in the world of VO, the possibilities are endless because they don't care about race, weight, height, size when it comes to your voice. It's just how well can you interpret the script and deliver what the client is asking for. And for those of you who don't want to go the client route and you want to create your own content, now it's just about what am I passionate about and what do I want to talk about? What do I want to communicate? And then you start putting something together. And once that passion meets that, your voice, you put the voice to your passion and then the money starts to roll. And I really want to know what you have to say about that, how we can convert the content that we're trying to create and monetize from it. Because some of us have really amazing ideas. I can't tell you how many ideas I have in a day. You know what I mean? But then I'm just like, yeah, but who? But how? I don't even know how to do budgets. Is it important for me to have a business degree so that I can understand how the money is flowing? Or like, where do I put my investments? Like, how do I go about making money from my ideas? Because most people are afraid of giving ideas and then the idea is stolen, which it happens, but not as often as we'd like to admit. Because if you stay long enough on one idea, someone else is going to think about it. And you're like, that person stole it. They stole my idea. So how do we go about that?
Cool.
And just before Julian answers that, please tell us the name of this project, Jazz, you're involved in, and is it on YouTube so we can be inspired and see the glory of your ideas?
It was called The Weekly Show. It used to be on NTV. And I also worked on XYZ with Julian as well. Just a bunch of we worked together for quite a while. We've been bumping along the ways from Royal Media to Energy Radio, I think was the last time we worked together. So it's been great. Although Julian, humbles you and makes your romantic notions just, sobers you up a little bit.
Apologies.
When you think it's going to be a hit, he's the one to talk to because he'll gently tell you no.
And I think, thanks so much for that, Jazz. And I think it's a good segue into the monetization part. And I think the key thing for what I'd like us to know is that not every idea will generate income. And it's something I really like to challenge creatives. It's a cold truth, but there are many ideas that are just good ideas. The reality is until you get to a certain level of either brand or you have equity in the industry is when people take up your ideas, because ideas are a very hard thing to communicate. And mind you, a lot of content created. In fact, I like to say this, not even all content is creative, When I talk content, I'm talking the totality of stuff. Okay, so not everything has to be creative. And as just you are talking, I remember there's a guy I met, he's a medical doctor, and he started just giving, just creating like YouTube videos and just talking about medical stuff. And he didn't have many followers, but you'd have on average, like you do sessions and you get 180 views, 200 views. Now, interestingly, it has opened so many doors for him. He's traveling around the world doing seminars, webinars, talking about medical stuff. So you see, can you imagine if he was looking for thousands of views, he'd be very disappointed. But he was very strategic. He made sure he pushed it in the medical circles, the WhatsApp groups, the various societies. So he knew, I just need 200 medics to follow me. And you create a space for them to talk their medical stuff. But it's opened a whole trajectory. He's even stopped practicing medicine. Now he's just this thought leader in terms of new technology, and is all over the world. So for him, it's working. So content monetization may not always come from the content itself, okay? Sometimes it comes from building your brand. And I think will.i.am said it, I think I've heard it with Wyclef John and everyone. They've always said that content has never really paid people. It's what you do with the fame. It's what you do with the clout you developed over time. So you find that even if you look at the top talents around the world, if you dig deeper into their revenue streams, very little comes actually from the finished product. It's normally the labels, the distribution, the marketing teams. But once you're Will Smith, it's what the Will Smith name monetizes. So it's how you monetize Will Smith. It's how you monetize the brand Friends, you see? So that's where the money is. So you are on the Friends show, you're on this show. It's what happens after that. Now people know you. That's when you see how the world has evolved into endorsements, and you're able to access doors, you're able to get into different spaces. And that's the equity you want to build. So some content in of itself has value. Other content directly may not have, but it's the trajectories and the kind of peripheral income you can generate. Now, I didn't want to go too much into the IP question because it's a whole thing. But what I want to say, the challenge with IP and pitching ideas, by law, the only way you can protect an idea, you have to express it. What I mean is, if you give an idea of a TV format, you have to create a demo, a version of it. That's the only time you can protect it. But as long as you're speaking verbally, there's no protection. And that's what Jazz said. Most ideas you have, someone else will come up with it. So that's the catch-22. But this is what I always encourage. I've had many of my ideas stolen, but what it has done for me on the flip side, rather than get upset, it validates me. If someone steals my idea and actually produces it, it helps me know, aha, so there was something to this idea. So my thinking is right, and I continue to pursue that. So what I normally encourage, by the time you're pitching an idea, of course, there are other techniques maybe we could explore later. There are ways to pitch an idea enough to paint a picture, not enough to be implemented, yeah? So there's always a way you can present. Like if I said, hey, I'm thinking of a new series that's going to demonstrate football in the estates, and we're going to show clubs, and it'll be like a league, leave it at that. I didn't invent football. I didn't invent coverage of sports in the neighborhood. So it's not enough for someone to go and do it. They can attempt, but they'll never get it right like you wanted. And then remember, when you're pitching your idea, yes, it hurts for it to be stolen, but you're also under the assumption it's a brilliant idea. Some ideas are excuse my German, are just shit. But in your mind, you're boiling, this is genius, but it actually isn't. Yeah? So however we slice it, the market will always determine what's good, what's bad. And unfortunately, irrespective of how we feel. So when it comes to IP, there's a whole process, and maybe Valk can invite me later and we can just go into it. It's a whole subject matter. So let me go into monetization so that we make sure we close on time. So I'm just going to look at some opportunities. Yeah, these are very high level, and everything I'm pitching, of course, does not account for the work involved there, but these are just the opportunities that exist. So there's pre-production opportunities. So like I said, with my content format, this is what I'm doing. I want to get it pre-produced because I have produced content on my own, which I believe strongly in, and I've burnt fingers. Yeah. Then later on, someone says, "Oh, you should have thought of this." So this time around, I said, "Let me try the other way around. Let me convince someone to put money. If I can convince them, then it means it's a viable idea." And of course, also strategically, I wouldn't have to put in any cash. So pre-production opportunities is commissioned content. We know a couple of stations here, the Mnets and so on, always do calls. Kenya Film Commission, a couple of studios will make a call for proposal and ask people to just to come in and, give an idea. And sometimes commission content is not always so interesting. Like now you'll find someone doing a call, we want content on climate action, we want content on sexual reproductive health. You'll never hear someone saying, I'm ready to pay people just to make comedy. It's rare, at least not in this market, but in other parts of the world that's happened. Sometimes you have storylining content where you kind of approach someone. Like for me, the format I'm working on, I'm targeting a very specific industry. So I'm developing a TV format to help boost insurance in the country. So the format has nothing to do with insurance, but they have designed it. I think they will benefit most from it. So my idea is to pitch the idea to them, show them how it's going to help them achieve their goals, sell insurance, change behavior, and I'll get my production dreams on screen, something like that. Then there's also thematic content. So like now there's a lot of funding going around climate change, food security, peace building. So this is where now you have an idea, you have the objective, you have an audience, then you say, how can I finance it? And I like how Jaz said, I have like 10 ideas every day. Then I start narrowing down of these ideas which are viable. So Jaz and I can come up with an idea, hey, let's do a TV show where we enter a swimming pool and go underwater and see how long we can stay underwater. It kind of sounds interesting, but who will pay for it? Yeah. So those are now, and to some extent, that's the maturity now of content creation, where you say, lovely idea, but for now, put it on ice. So when James Cameron tried to pitch Avatar, no one wanted to buy it because they're saying, we don't even understand what you're saying. Motion capture, I don't know, the concept was weird. So what did he do? He financed the first one. He had to pay for it. He did a few scenes, showed it to a few studios. I think it took him like 10 years. Then when people started seeing. However, while he was working on Avatar, he still kept diverging to do his day job. He did Titanic. What other movies did he do? He was doing now normal gigs, but he had this dream of doing Avatar and no one was buying it. So he was generating income from other sources to do that. So maybe you're a banker, it's fine. Keep your banking job, keep developing your content until it's enough to cover your overheads or feed you completely. So commission content, I think we've already talked about it, and these calls for proposals are there, but you just have to think through. You have to network, talk to people, understand who is commissioning content. I know sometimes Mnet will say, hey, we are giving $10,000. We want to buy 100 films. We just want dramas. It should be 90 minutes. And I think some of you have come across them. So mainly in the visual world, I've not seen as much in terms of print and radio and audio, because in Kenya, for our audio market is not as advanced as others. So people like BBC do that, Mnet, and so on. I think I've already talked about storylining. This is where you kind of develop a concept with an end in mind. Like I said, my TV format, I already know who I'm targeting to finance it. So the intent is I'll kind of co-produce with them. The flip side is you do lose some creative control because they'll probably come back to me and say, no, include this, add that. So if you want full editorial control, you have to find a way to finance and bankroll that. And these are some formats that have been done and content pieces these organizations have produced. So someone is creating it. And this is one way of also generating revenue so that you're able to pursue your kind of personal projects. I think thematic, we already talked about it. Sometimes we call Makutano Junction, which was fully funded. Shamba Shape Up is fully funded. It was designed specifically to speak to agriculture industry, fertilizer. But when you watch it, it's just a nice show. But they already had kind of the planning behind it. Then there are those production opportunities where when the show is actually going on, I think we all know things like product placement. You notice in some shows, everyone is talking with a Samsung, everyone is drinking a Budweiser. They've paid for that space. So when you're designing your content, you plan for that in mind. And what other collaboration or partnership agreements may you have? I remember this movie, if you watched it, the movie or the series Transporter, before they went to production, they actually approached car makers and told them, hey, we are doing a show and it's all about the car. And people are told to bid, and Audi won the bid. And they paid a couple of $1 million, and they put the movie. Thank goodness the movie did well, and Audi went to sell like another 20,000 models. So it can go either way, remember. They could have done it and the movie doesn't work well. I think the last time I checked, I think Coca-Cola were paying something like $5 million to have their cup on the desk on X Factor. And actually there's no Coke inside. So the hosts are free to drink what they want, but the contract is it must be a Coca-Cola cup. But remember first, Simon Cowell was a famous producer for music and artist. So when he pitched the show, he had already built trust and credibility. So sometimes the reason you're not able to sell your content is you're not credible. So if today Julian said, I want to create a show, like I personally, I love architecture, I love interior design, but nobody knows me for that. So I have to build my credentials in that space. Then I can create a TV format. But if I came out of the blue, is why should you really say we are talking about this? But if I talk about media, I can say, hey, I want to do a show where I talk to different journalists. When I show my CV, they'll say, okay, we can see. So I want you to think of content and product like any other industry. I don't know if any of you would buy Toyota rice, because we know Toyota for automotive work. So for them to go into the food market, they can probably manufacture great products, but we know them for the auto industry. So you also have to think of what are your credentials in that space. Then things like collaboration. This is something that was done, a movie called Food Inc. Very nice, and just looking at how animals and how food, the feeds, and the impact on the environment, the kind of supplements they're fed. But this was a fully funded project. And there's this famous, what's this guy who did Bowling for Columbine? I keep forgetting his name. Roger Moore, I think, the famous filmmaker. I think it's called Roger Moore, Richard Moore, and he's done a whole series of stuff. And all his movies are fully funded. So before he starts production, he goes, Chris Rock did something called, I think, Hair. So all those you find before they actually start production, they look for companies that are interested in this topic, and then they do that. And it's the same, even in Hollywood, all of these action movies you watch, most of them will have started 7-8 years before, and before they go into production, because the budgets are huge, they have to get financing. You can't spot yourself $50 million, that will wipe you out. So a lot of content we see international, sometimes we think someone just came up with an idea and then just put it on TV and it took off. No, there's a whole world behind it, and encourage us to kind of dig deep into that. Then, of course, post-production revenue. So these are now the tangible ways, the things we tend to see. So you can have theatrical, so that's showing in big screen. I've started seeing at least a movie in Kenya. Revenues not so much. You can do on demand, license it to the likes of the Netflixes of this world and so on. You have broadcast, you sell to local stations, streaming, those who want to do via online websites. You have satellites, your DSTV, Star Times, they're always buying content, commissioning content. DVD is still a very huge thing, even in Nigeria. It's still the largest revenue earner for their films, by the way. So it may look like it's dead. It's not. Even in Kenya, especially vernacular content, is still going straight to DVD. But I'm sure most of us are thinking, like, who has DVDs? People are still watching on DVD and selling like hundreds of thousands of copies. Some people do publishing, especially when it comes to music and content, stage and other. Tinga Tinga Tales in a theatrical piece, I think Eric Wainaina, earning royalties. It's been done on Broadway in London. So they are very multiple depending on the content piece you're doing. If you're maybe doing manuscripts, you do it's translated, adaptations, and done so on and so forth. So let me pause there on monetization. I know I've powered through, but we can have a chat. But the key thing here is just to know, the key thing I'd say is remember the 3 steps. You can pre-design. So before you start your content, think of the revenue plan. When you're creating the content, are there revenue opportunities in your content? And I'm sure you've had podcasts saying, hey, this podcast is brought to you by this company, blah, blah, blah. So someone has paid for that slot through advertising. Then there's post-production where you sell the actual content as a service. Yeah. So I think before we jump to questions, I just wanted to spend a brief about maybe a few minutes just talking about specifically the VO space. So I want to be cheeky here. There's some assumptions. This is the first that you have a good voice. Just because you want to do VO work doesn't mean you're cut out for it, like Julian can't act. So the assumption here, first, you have a good voice. So people should have told, just as a rule of thumb, 1 or 2 people said, wow, I love your voice, or your partner says, every time we talk on the phone, I feel so good. Those are indicators that you have a rich voice. So your tone, your quality, and there's no science, it's subjective, but there's certain voices that just sound good on a beer ad, others sound good when you're talking about kids, others sound good when you're doing a documentary. So you have to kind of understand that. You need to be very articulate, irrespective of what you're saying. But if you're reading something, everyone can hear. So that's something important and a skill you must develop. Then you understand your chosen language well. So people say, yeah, I do English, but your pronunciations are off. Or you say I do Swahili, or you French, or you Luo, or whatever language you perfect, you should be pretty spot on for it, because that's how you begin to kind of distinguish yourself. Then you have distinct characteristics. I mean, we all know Morgan Freeman's voice, Samuel L. Jackson, their voices whom, whether you see or not, Richard Attenborough, BBC, Jeff Koinange, locally in Academy, he speaks, we all know who that is, yeah? So that's that tonality you've developed. And then voiceover for me really is performance, yeah? So can you act? Can you play with your voice? Can you do dynamism? Are you versatile? I keep referencing Jazz. I think Jazz can do 8 to 10 languages. You know, she can act as an Asian, act as an American, act like sound like a Kikuyu, sound like a Nigerian, South African. You see, so that's now the performance side of it. And I think the same skills used in acting are the ones that come out. And voice is even more difficult because you don't have the power of visual reference. So I should be able to hear your voice and know you're sad. I should hear your voice and know you're angry. So these are skills you must develop. So how do you get voiceover jobs? Auditioning is so important as much as possible. You have to keep getting these auditions because that's how you get out there. So you will do your showreels and your demos, but every time there's a call, and I'm going to talk a little bit about how to find these opportunities. So I encourage people to take an acting class. Voice is the same as performance. So it is a skill you develop as you develop accounting, as you develop how to drive. So there's voice over work is not natural. Some people may have natural talent, but there's none who is just born and they just come out saying, welcome to today's show. It never happens. Those people have been rehearsing, refining, perfecting. So that's the first thing you must put in the work. Practice reading out loud, because what it does, it helps you to hear yourself, articulate yourself, give different emotions. I encourage you to seek out pro bono jobs to build your resume. So this could be as simple as maybe in your church. Just say, hey, can I MC the service? When the announcements, can I read announcements? All that is an opportunity for you to practice in front of people, refine and perfect your skill sets. Network with other voice actors as you're doing as members of this association, which is great. Look out for voiceover buyers in your region. So here, what I mean is look out for companies and industry that actually do use voiceover. Send them your demo, tell them, hi, can I do this for you? Can I record this for you? And I'll show you some areas to explore. Develop distinct characters and styles. Like I'm always fascinated by Jazz, is it Yardley Smith, who was on The Simpsons, who used to play like, I don't know, 7 characters, something crazy like that. But Simpson, the mom, I don't know, the factory worker. And I was so shocked to discover later it was the same person, more so that she was a woman, but she'd play male roles. It was crazy. I once watched a video.
It's the same as it's the same with Seth MacFarlane, is it? With Family Guy.
Exactly. Absolutely. You see, so that person is collecting 8 salaries, because they're paid per. Absolutely paid per view. So the more you can do, the more opportunities you get. And I think I'll allow Eric to say something after this, and also Simaloy, because they're active users of voiceover work. And then, of course, follow up and be persistent. It's not easy. It takes time. And you just have to keep at it. There's really, and what I'll keep saying, just like any other industry, if you're in banking, if you're a lawyer, you're not going to get clients. You want to open shop and then people walk in. You just have to get out there. It's the same thing with any content or kind of talent. So when you're looking for, in terms of job postings or when there are opportunities, check out what language they want. They want specific accents, and some casting agencies really go detailed. Some will tell you you're looking for a person who can play the role of a man at this stage, so on and so forth. What kind of work is it? Is it contract work? Is it a telenovela? Like Kenya is becoming a big hub for dubbing all these international shows. Any timelines you need to meet. How does a client want the work delivered? Is it MP3? Is it via email? And also how much are they paying? So that, of course, early days as you build your brand, take whatever you get, So I think just as I wrap up is the voiceover marketing basics. You need a really strong resume. So have a portfolio, a demo showreel, just showcasing your skills. Do you have character types? You say I can act as an old person. I think I saw Ali Mangola joining on the call, and he's one of those guys I know who have done amazing range of characters and voices. Then language skills. Do you have any technical skills and production? So you find their VOs who can not only record but edit themselves. So if you send a script, they send it to you finished, rather than you don't have to come over to the studio. So that's also an addition. If I wanted someone to do a VO, if they tell me they also have access to a studio, even better. That saves me money, it saves me time. And what other skills can you offer? And the resources you have. It's important to have some logical rate card. Don't say, rate on request, ama tutakosana. You know, you have some sense of what should I charge? Network, ask, okay, if Jeff Koinange charges this and you person charges, yeah, I think I'm in this range. Have good references and referees, and then keep good active contacts. I can't tell you the number of times I would receive showreels back in my day, and you call the person and the phone is this number is no longer in service. Send an email, it bounces back, you know, and you had work for them. I'll only try once or twice, and immediately I'll move on. So just in terms of the potential kind of clients or places you could shop around for VO work, I think this is my last slide. And please don't worry, I know I've powered through, but you have this to read slowly. Radio and TV stations, you can do either the station ID, you've heard you're listening to Capital FM, this is Radio Citizen, then you could actually be a VO in the station where you have a show. That's still part of VoiceOver work. Advertising agencies are huge because they all do all the radio ads and all. And a lot of media houses nowadays have in-house production. Then you have media production companies like Eric Decimal Media is commissioned by Nat Geo to do a docu-series, to do a film. So he maintains a database of all this voiceover talent and is constantly looking for new voices, because if I used Andrew in a certain show and it's popular, I probably can't use his name on another one because everyone will say, is not the voice of the character in that show. So that's a reality of you, and that's why you want to have a dynamic range. So today you may play an alpha female character, next time you play a different one. So you want to be able to have that diversity. There's value-added service providers. These are those guys you call and say, thank you for calling Safaricom. Do you know that Safaricom, that's a whole industry itself, which is pretty huge. There's training and instructional videos. So these are institutions, colleges are doing them, training companies need a lot of this. You've seen all those boring videos saying, even including, you know, the in-flight one, you know, remember to cool down. That's a your job. Someone is paid to do that. You have content creators for education, instructional manuals, event production companies. If you've attended events, there are a lot of work, emceeing, you know, you're able to record theater. Is a big space. Then the self-production. This is where now you create your own self-branded content or podcasts and so on and so forth. Yeah. So that's all I had for today. It's a lot. I'm sorry. Big and broad subject area. But thanks for having me, and I'm open to questions. And yeah, and I think I'll hand over to Jazz, but we do have Musyoka and Simaloy. So if you have any reflections, please share as active buyers of your services. Thanks, everyone.
Wow. Thank you so much, Julian. I mean,
don't be sorry. It's okay.
Amazing. I just want to ask one thing. If you could, and this goes out to everyone. We're 1 minute to 7:30. So if you could kindly give us 30 more minutes so that we can have our Q&A and you can get your questions in, and also we can wind up. So if that's okay with you, I would like 30 more minutes. If you could just raise your hands, then we know that it is fine. If you'd like to leave, no worries. We bid you farewell. However, for those of you who would like to go on with the Q&A, then please stay with us and we shall continue.
And if you cannot stay with us, feel free to leave your question in the chat, because this session is being recorded. We're going to have it in our private VoiceOver Facebook group, so you can watch it later on, only for those who are paid members. And Jazz will tell us more about that if you want to become a voice or a member of Valk. And